All right, welcome to a brand new explainer. Today, we're unpacking a truly massive wilderness social experiment. Seriously, picture this. 100 people dropped straight into the harsh, unforgiving wilderness, and they're all competing for a chance to split a life-changing $250,000. The rules? Stunningly simple. Just survive. The team with the most members left standing when rescue finally arrives takes home the cash. But as we're going to see, surviving the elements, yeah, that's a walk in the park compared to surviving each other.
Okay, let's dive into this. I want to challenge your immediate assumptions right off the bat. If you were stranded in the woods, who would you actually want by your side? A hardened wilderness expert who can bust out a fire from scratch? Or someone with literally zero outdoor experience who just really knows how to get along with people? Your gut probably screams for the expert, right? Well, human psychology is a tricky beast, and this experiment completely flips that conventional wisdom totally on its head.
So, part 1. The Extreme Wilderness Experiment.
To understand why this happens, we really have to look at the core premise here. The 100 participants were split right down the middle into two camps. On one side, you've got the blue team. These are self-proclaimed survival experts who literally spend months in the woods just for fun. On the other side, the red team, complete amateurs who openly admitted they might not even last a weekend outdoors. And the irony right from day one is absolutely incredible. The blue team experts were just so overconfident. They scoffed at the idea of needing modern conveniences, choosing to rely purely on their rugged, bare-bones skills. Meanwhile, the red team totally recognized their lack of experience, so they hit up a supply store before the drop and practically bought the place out. They brought in basic creature comforts like tarps and, brilliantly, huge 24-packs of bottled water. They really didn't care about looking tough. They just cared about making life a little easier.
And that brings us to the number 50. You see, the blue team didn't just have one or two natural leaders. They had 50 highly opinionated survivalists. Just think about that for a second. 50 people who are entirely used to doing things their own way, relying only on themselves, and essentially surviving solo. It's basically a recipe for either the greatest super team ever assembled or, an absolute total disaster.
Which leads us to part 2, the downfall of expert egos. Now, what's really interesting about this is that, unfortunately, for those experts, their massive initial advantage, knowing exactly how to forage and build elaborate shelters, rapidly became their ultimate downfall. The very first dropouts from the blue team weren't beaten by the harsh wilderness or the wild animals at all. No, it was a catastrophic, completely self-inflicted lack of trust. The environment wasn't the real threat here, the ego was. You had this massive clash of alpha personalities where everyone thought their specific way of building a shelter or managing resources was the absolute only right way. Instead of compromising, they just bickered. And instead of enduring the arguments, people literally started packing their bags and going home on day 2.
And this toxic individualism just started infecting every single aspect of the blue team's camp. Some experts, like a participant named Julia, actively began working against their own peers. Because they didn't trust the wider group to manage resources responsibly, they actually started secretly hiding foraged food out in the woods. They fractured their communication completely. And let's be real, when you're actively hiding food from your own team, you're not a team anymore. You're just 50 isolated individuals who happen to be standing in the same forest.
All right, part 3, the power of amateur teamwork.
Let's shift gears and look at the red team. Now, they were far from perfect. Actually, they irresponsibly demolished almost all of their store-bought snacks by day 2. They were staring down the barrel of some very severe hunger super early on. But here is the absolute crucial difference. Because they couldn't rely on individual wilderness skills, they had to adapt immediately and collectively, or they were going to fail entirely. Their sheer lack of outdoor skills essentially forced them to build a highly disciplined, tight-knit micro-community. When the food ran low, they didn't go hiding it from each other. Instead, they mutually agreed to strict rationing, literally surviving on just one apple per person per day. They even appointed a camp chef to make sure what little they had was divided fairly. And when the nights got freezing cold, they gathered together inside their makeshift shelters, sharing body heat and boosting morale. They leaned on each other because, well, they literally had nothing else to lean on. If we look at the timeline, you can clearly map out these psychological breaking points. By day 2, the first expert throws in the towel, and it's purely out of frustration with their own team. Fast forward to day 4, the amateurs are entirely out of food and facing genuine hunger. Then on day 8, an unrelenting, massive storm hits the camp, tanking the temperature and flooding everyone's shelters. Now, the weather tested both camps equally, but their social structures responded in completely, radically different ways.
Moving into Part 4, Storms, Food, and Fractures.
So this massive storm forces everyone into their shelters, soaking their clothes and totally crushing their spirits. It introduces our mid-game crisis, a psychological test of temptation that would push both teams right to the absolute brink. Both camps were given a chance to win a reward if they could return a drop of 50 cans of food unopened after 72 hours. And what did both teams do? Out of sheer paranoia and this strategic fear that the other team might gain an advantage, they literally buried the massive food drops unopened, even while they were physically starving. The intense mistrust of the game and the fear of showing any weakness to the other side caused them to hide the cans rather than risk opening them and losing the challenge. It's just a stunning display of competitive psychology completely overriding basic human needs.
But wow, the ultimate betrayal went down a few days later during a box opening challenge. The teams were offered a series of mysterious supply boxes, and the first person to press a button claimed the box for their side. Well, when a box containing steak and meat was revealed, a blue team member named Patrick selfishly smashed the button, instantly claiming it. The big problem here? He completely ignored the desperate pleas of his own teammates, including a vegetarian who cried out that she wouldn't be able to eat any of it. When confronted, his response was literally just, "I don't care." This one singular act of selfishness triggered an immediate mass walkout of disgusted experts. And this brilliantly illustrates the ironic reversal of the entire experiment. On one side, you've got the blue team. Sure, they won the stake, they had the physical calories, but they utterly destroyed their social cohesion in the process. They were well fed, but they hated each other, which just led to constant self-eliminations. And then on the flip side, the red team. They were starving, they were missing out on the rewards, but they shared their chores, they communicated, and they maintained absolute solidarity.
Now for the final stretch, Part 5, the ultimate wilderness tiebreaker.
As the days painfully grinded on toward the 3-week mark, the constant eliminations on the blue team meant the power dynamics completely flipped. The sheer unity of the amateurs meant they were actually retaining way more members than the endlessly bickering experts. As one participant perfectly summarized the core irony of the blue team's collapse, just because you have the ability to survive alone in the wilderness doesn't mean you can survive as a team. Survival in a group setting is fundamentally a social skill, not just a physical one. You can know how to build the absolute perfect shelter, but if you alienate the people sleeping inside it with you, you're eventually going to find yourself alone, exhausted, and defeated. Let's see how this all builds up to break the stalemate. The host, Mr. Beast, initiates a sudden flare hunt challenge. But because the red team had proven their unbreakable unity, they were handed the ultimate control, the map. The amateurs were allowed to go out and hide the flare in the wilderness, essentially forcing the remaining experts to search for it blindfolded until the race began. Think about that flip. The unified amateurs, the ones who knew literally nothing about the wild on day one, now held ultimate power over the wilderness experts. Which leaves us with this final, truly provocative thought. As you navigate your own life, your workplace, or your community, you really have to ask yourself, is individual expertise actually worth it if it sacrifices the trust of your team? You might be the sharpest tool in the shed, but if you can't build with others, your solo survival skills are only going to get you so far. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.